This past Friday, February 7th, Axios carried a story with the headline, "Jewish Groups Rebuke Trump on Immigration and Musk Moves." Over 100 Jewish groups voiced deep concern and alarm over a number of Donald Trump's policies, notably cracking down on illegal immigration. The letter they signed referred to their concerns over, quote, "the scapegoating and dehumanization of immigrants, people of color, transgender people, and other marginalized groups." It called out the pardoning of, quote, "violent insurrectionists," referring to the January 6th prisoners who were let go. It called out the freezing of federal funds that the Trump administration has called for in order to prevent money going to all sorts of progressive causes, and trying to figure out where all the grant money and the aid money that are included in the U.S. budget are actually going, which is Elon Musk's job at the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, this letter was signed by over 100 Jewish groups. The top signatories on it were the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, and the Rabbinical Assembly, which is basically what's called conservative Judaism. And don't let the name conservative fool you. Conservative Judaism is very left-wing, just like Reform Judaism. The name is kind of an artifact of history. But you have, those are the three top-line groups, and then you have 100 other groups on there. And it's kind of a laundry list of left-wing anti-Israel groups like J Street and Bend the Arc, but also by some establishment Jewish organizations like the Jewish Community Relations Councils of numerous American cities, including the large Jewish communities such as Atlanta and St. Louis. Now, these Jewish Community Relations Councils are funded by Jewish Federation dollars, money coming out of regular Jews in the Jewish community, and are supposed to represent the interests of the Jewish community. The letter was also signed by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Who's that? The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society? Well, that's an organization that was founded in the 1880s with the purpose of helping Jews from Russia and other parts of Europe who were escaping pogroms and persecution there. Decades ago, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society ceased to really perform any function for the Jewish community, and since then has just been helping immigrants in general. And for the last few years, during this whole crisis on the southern border of the United States, they have been at the forefront of actually helping illegal immigrants cross the United States border, breaking the law. That's what they've been involved in, and they've been getting government grants to do it. So they're also signed on here. So I mentioned that the top signatory on this letter, signed by over 100 left-wing progressive Jewish groups, is the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. They're actually the ones who organized this letter. And if you go to their website and you check out what issues they care about, they list countering anti-Semitism, LGBTQ plus rights and safety, racial justice, countering white supremacy, immigrant rights, countering Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate, criminal justice reform, women's reproductive rights, meaning they're pro-abortion, gun violence prevention, meaning they're against the Second Amendment. It's basically a nice list of all the progressive left-wing issues in America that don't have a whole lot to do with the well-being of the Jewish community. This is who's behind this letter. These over 100 groups that are signed on here, this is left-wing progressive Judaism asserting itself and criticizing Donald Trump's America First policies. For far too long, these left-wing progressive groups that are part of the Jewish community, who've taken over being the spokesman for the Jewish community, speak on behalf of the Jews in America. And increasingly, they don't represent us. Donald Trump got a larger share of the Jewish vote than anyone in the last 40 years. And more Jews are realizing that this Jewish establishment really doesn't speak to them. And this statement that just came out on Friday is really just a continuation in a long line of statements that show just how out of touch these Jewish establishment figures are. So if you go back to December, just a couple months ago, we had statements coming out from major Jewish organizations like the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League, and even the Jewish Federations of North America, expressing their continued support for the idea of forming a Palestinian state, a so-called two-state solution. Now, in July, just a few months before that, the Knesset held a vote. And in that Knesset vote, the members of Israel's Knesset, Israel's parliament, rejected any calls for a Palestinian state. Only 9 Knesset members voted against this proposal, And all 9 were members of the Arab parties in the Knesset who are also openly hostile to Israel. And then in December, we have a statement from Jason Isaacson, the head of policy and political affairs for the American Jewish Committee, saying that, quote, the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, indigenous to both Jews and Arabs, cannot be the exclusive domain of one people, but must be shared. Never mind the fact that the Arabs migrated to Israel and the rest of the Levant long after the Jewish people arrived in the land, but let's not bother Jason Isaacson with historical facts. Or a spokesperson for the Jewish Federations of North America said at that time that the Jewish Federation's position supports a two-state solution where Israel lives in peace with a demilitarized Palestinian state. And that position is still on the Jewish Federation of North America's website. Or the Anti-Defamation League, Carol Nuriel, who is the director of the Anti-Defamation League's Israel office, condemned proposals to move Palestinians out of Gaza. We are deeply troubled by statements from Israeli government ministers and activists advocating for the emigration of Palestinians in Gaza. This view reflects an inhumane approach. It tarnishes Israel's reputation and is fundamentally immoral. So according to Carol Nuriel, encouraging Palestinian Arabs in the Gaza Strip from exercising their fundamental right to seek asylum in neighboring countries and to get out of a war zone is fundamentally immoral and inhumane. The Jewish establishment has long ago ceased to represent the interests of the Jewish people. This is a situation that cannot go on. When people read news stories in places like Axios about major Jewish organizations who come out against Donald Trump's policies on immigration and against common sense policies that increase the security of American citizens, when they come out on Israel against the overwhelming position of the vast majority of Israel's Jewish population, we can no longer say that they represent Jewish interests, that they represent the Jewish community. It's time for a new leadership of the Jewish people. Look, this letter released on Friday, signed by over 100 left-wing Jewish organizations, and the recent statements by the organizations that I mentioned in favor of a Palestinian state just demonstrate how out of touch the Jewish establishment leadership is. It is time for a new direction. It is time for new leadership of the Jewish community, of the Zionist community. And if you are like me, that you're fed up with these people speaking on behalf of the Jewish people, spouting this nonsense, join our movement. Go to Israel365action.com and join the movement today.